Welcome back. So the next topic that we're going to talk about is functional dependency. And we've seen this in place in our databases, but we might have not really known the terminology or what it actually means. And so in its simplest forms, basically what we're saying is that when we look at our database and we have it normalized and we have an effective, useful database with multiple tables, multiple relations, right? We have functional dependency. And so what I mean by that is if you look at a table and say we're looking at a table that represents students at a college, right? Kind of used this example before. And so say this table, we have a student ID number, and that ID number is going to be most likely the primary key. And then we have additional attributes for that relation. We have the student first name, the student last name, student address, the major that the student is, right? All of those other attributes are functionally dependent upon that student ID number, right? And so all we really mean by that is that just by looking at a unique value, a unique student ID number, we can determine the student's name, the student's major, the student's address, all of that other information, all of those other attributes in the table. When we can do that, we have functional dependency. And so you often see it written right there. You can see the X arrow Y. We're going to say that X determines Y. Or another way of saying that is that Y is functionally dependent upon X. And so again, what we mean by that is when we know X, we can determine Y. When we know the student ID number, we can determine all the attributes associated in that table, the student name, student address, so on and so forth. So X determines Y, or Y is functionally dependent upon X. That's all we mean. We've seen this in all of our databases, all of our tables that we've looked at. We've seen this. So now we actually kind of understand what that means, and we have a term to associate with it. So that's pretty cool. All right, next up we have keys. We're pretty familiar with keys at this point. We have primary keys, we have foreign keys, we have composite keys, we have candidate keys, right? So let's kind of review the different keys that we have. So the primary key is the one that uniquely identifies each record, right? And so that can be a single field, like a student ID number, or it can be a composite key, which is just multiple fields. So, for instance, we can have the student's first name and the student's last name. And if those together uniquely identify a student, then we can use that as a primary key, but it is now a composite key because it's two different fields, two different attributes. And so, if we have that, now we have two different things that we could use as the primary key. We have the student ID, and we have the composite key, the student's first name and last name. So let's throw in a third one. We can say that we also include the student's social security number. Really bad practice, I know. But if we did for some reason, all three of those would be considered candidate keys because they're all eligible to be the primary key. When you're looking at candidate keys, you want to take into things like privacy, right? Obviously, we're not going to want to use the social security number of the students to identify them, so we're going to use the student ID. But that social security number is still a candidate key because it could still potentially be the primary key. Same with our composite key, the student's first name and last name. Together, those two uniquely identify the student, so it could be used as a primary key. So that 2 is a candidate key. Typically, we want to try to use single field primary keys whenever possible. So again, the best solution is still the student ID. You know, it's also very similar to in the military, right? We on all our dog tags and IDs and things like that, it used to be our social security number. That's how you would identify each soldier, right? They've gone away from that now, and every soldier has a DoD ID number, a Department of Defense number. So that's now what's on our dog tags, that's now what's on our common access cards, all of that. That's how we're now uniquely identified, is through our DoD ID number, no longer our social security number, just kind of protecting that privacy. Something we didn't really care too much about in the past. So there's keys: primary, composite, foreign keys, candidate keys, right? Foreign key, as we know, is just a primary key existing in another table. That's how we create the relations. So that's pretty fun. All right, we'll come back to normal forms in a different video. So I hope this was helpful for you guys, and we'll see you in the next one.